Welcome to our deep dive into Hedera Hashgraph. You might have heard of it. It's getting a lot of attention as a possible alternative to blockchain.
Yeah, it's a
As-
hot topic.
yeah, what is it about Hedera that makes it so different?
Well, what's interesting about Hedera is that it's kind of designed to address some of the limitations that we see with blockchain technology,
Okay.
particularly things like speed and security
hmm
and even environmental impact.
So that's kind of a big deal these days.
Huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're using Hedera's own website as our source for this deep dive.
Okay.
We're looking specifically at their blog.
Right.
So let's start at the beginning. What is Hedera? Like, how would you describe it in a nutshell? And how does it work?
Okay. So at its core, Hedera is a public distributed ledger technology,
Okay.
just like blockchain. But instead of using a chain of blanks, it uses this different data structure called a hash graph. So you can kind of picture it like a network where everybody's agreeing on the order of transactions without needing some sort of central authority.
Uh-huh.
So that's basically what Hedera's hash graph consensus achieves.
So it's all about consensus,
Yeah.
but achieving it in a different way.
Right.
And that's what allows it to be faster and more energy efficient and all that.
Yeah, and that approach leads to like incredibly fast transaction speeds and much lower energy consumption.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal.
Yeah.
But how does this actually benefit me or you? What can you actually do with Hedera?
So this is where the four main Hedera services come into play.
Okay.
So they have a token service, a consensus service, smart contracts, and then their native cryptocurrency, HBAR.
Okay, let's go through those one by one. Let's start with the token service. What is that?
Okay, so the token service, you can think of it as like a toolkit to create your own digital tokens.
Okay.
And these tokens can represent anything of value. Loyalty points, fractional ownership,
Okay.
digital art, anything.
So if I want to like launch a line of limited edition digital sneakers or something,
Exactly.
I could create a token on the token service.
Exactly.
That would be proof of ownership.
Yes.
Yeah.
Each one would be unique and verifiable on the network. So it prevents counterfeiting and fraud.
That's super cool. Okay, what about this consensus service?
So the consensus service provides a verifiable record of every transaction that happens on the network.
Okay.
So it's like a public notary that's confirming the authenticity and the order of events,
Mm-hmm.
which is super important for building trust and transparency in any kind of application.
So that could be anything from like tracking a diamond
Yeah.
to making sure that votes are accurate, all
Yes.
sorts of things.
Exactly.
Okay, and then you mentioned smart contracts.
Yes.
What are those?
So smart contracts are basically self-executing agreements.
Okay.
They're written in code, and they allow you to automate complex transactions
Yeah.
and processes without needing someone in the middle.
I feel like every time we talk about smart contracts, I always feel like we need to do an ELI 5 because I think for people who aren't developers, it can be kind of a difficult concept.
Yeah.
So like, what would be a simple example of a smart contract?
Okay. So let's say you're selling something online.
Uh-huh.
The smart contract could automatically release the payment to you when the buyer confirms that they've received the goods.
Oh,
So
okay.
you don't have to rely on a third-party escrow service
Right.
or like worry about being scammed.
Yeah, it's all about automating trust, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then finally, what about HBAR? Where does that fit in?
So HBAR is Hedera's cryptocurrency,
Okay.
and it's used to pay for transaction fees on the network,
Okay.
but it also secures the network through staking.
So it's like the fuel that makes the whole thing run.
Exactly.
Okay. One thing I noticed on the website is that Hedera really emphasizes open source code.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
So transparency is one of their core principles. And by making the code open source, they're allowing anyone to inspect it, audit it,
Okay.
and confirm that the system's working the way it's supposed to,
Got it.
which builds trust and accountability.
Yeah, for sure. And I also noticed they have a whole section of the website dedicated to transparency.
Yes.
Where can people find information about their governance and all of that?
You can find all kinds of information about their governance. They publish meeting minutes from their governing council, roadmap updates,
Oh.
and even details about their sustainability initiatives.
Okay, so they're really trying to make everything public.
Exactly. They want to be as transparent as possible.
So it's not just talk, they're actually putting it into practice.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that's really good to know. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about developers. Because
Good.
you mentioned that Hedera has a lot to offer developers.
Yeah, they do.
So what kind of resources have they created for developers?
Okay. They have a ton of developer resources, including extensive documentation, a learning center. That covers everything from the basics of blockchain to really advanced concepts.
Wow.
And they even have a fee estimator to help developers like plan their project costs.
So they're really trying to make it user-friendly for developers to come in
Absolutely.
and build on the platform. What about for people who maybe prefer a more concise overview?
Okay, well, they also have the Hedera developer highlights blog posts.
Okay.
And those offer like really nice summaries of recent developments and new resources.
So they can kind of see what's happening at a glance.
Yeah,
Okay. And you mentioned they have a hackathon going on?
they do. It's called Hello Future.
Okay, cool.
It's really interesting.
And then how are they building community amongst developers?
Well, they offer grants and bounties to encourage developers to contribute to the ecosystem,
Oh, wow.
and their community forums are very active.
Okay.
So they have a lot of developers helping each other, sharing ideas, and collaborating on projects.
So it's a really collaborative environment. That's awesome. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. Can you describe the overall Hedera ecosystem? What does that look like?
The Hedera ecosystem is super diverse and growing really rapidly.
Okay.
So we're seeing everything from Web3 and enterprise-grade applications
Okay.
to wallets and custodians for managing your digital assets,
Okay.
and even sophisticated network explorers that let you like visualize the network in action.
That's really cool. Can you give me some specific examples? You mentioned functional use cases earlier.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that Hedera is actually being used in the real world right now?
Well, one that's really interesting is using Hedera to enhance data integrity and AI.
Okay.
So with verifiable compute, you can actually prove that AI models are processing data correctly and ethically,
Oh, wow.
which is a big concern these days.
Yeah, that's really important. So it's not just about building AI, it's about making sure that it's trustworthy AI.
Exactly.
No.
Another really interesting one is real-world asset tokenization. So imagine being able to invest in fractions of real estate or artwork or even private companies using tokens on the Hedera network.
So that changes how we think about ownership
Exactly.
and investment.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned carbon markets earlier.
Yes.
I'm curious about that.
So they're actually using Hedera to create auditable carbon markets,
Okay.
which allows businesses to track and offset their emissions with greater transparency and accuracy.
Okay, so that's really in line with their commitment to sustainability.
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's talk about governance,
Okay.
because this is kind of a unique aspect of Hedera.
Yeah, they have a very unique governance model.
So remind me, what is the governing council?
So the governing council is made up of over 30 leading organizations.
Okay, like who are we talking about?
Google, IBM, Boeing, LG, Standard Bank, Avery Dennison.
Wow, so it's a pretty diverse group.
It is.
Okay, and how does the council actually work?
So it's designed to be geographically distributed, and decisions are made through a consensus-based voting process.
Okay.
So their main responsibility is to make sure that the network is stable, secure,
Uh-huh.
and that it's successful in the long term.
So how do we know that they're actually being transparent about their decisions?
Well, remember that commitment to transparency.
Yeah.
It extends to the governing council as well.
Okay.
So their meetings are recorded, and then those minutes are published
Wow.
on the Hedera network. So anybody can go back and see how they made those decisions.
Okay, and who was involved in all of that?
Exactly.
Okay. And it's not just about the meetings, right?
No, Hedera also makes their roadmap publicly available so that everybody has insight into their future plans and what they're going to be developing, what their priorities are.
Okay. And they're also working with policymakers and things, right?
Yes, they're also very actively involved in shaping public policy
Okay.
related to blockchain and DLT.
Cool.
So they're working with regulators and policymakers.
So they're really taking a proactive approach to
Absolutely.
make sure that this technology is developed responsibly.
Exactly.
Okay. Now let's get to some breaking news
Okay.
from the Hedera blog, because things move so fast.
Yeah, they do.
What are some of the recent developments that you've seen that have stood out to you?
Well, there's been a lot of excitement about EQTY Labs' verifiable compute solution.
Okay.
So they're using Hedera to bring a new level of trust and transparency to AI,
Okay.
particularly when it comes to proving that data is being used ethically and responsibly,
Okay.
which is a big deal.
Huge.
Yeah.
So that's really addressing those concerns around AI bias
Yeah.
and data privacy.
Exactly.
What else?
Another really big development is Hedera's adoption of the Chainlink Data Standard.
Okay, now what is that?
So the Chainlink Data Standard is basically a framework that ensures that data being fed into smart contracts is accurate and reliable.
Okay, so it's like quality control
Exactly.
for the data.
Yeah.
Okay. And why is that important?
Well, this is huge for the growth of DeFi on the Hedera network,
Oh.
decentralized finance.
Okay.
So by integrating with Chainlink, Hedera is opening the door for much more complex and sophisticated financial applications
Uh-huh.
that rely on real-world data.
Okay.
So things like lending platforms,
Okay.
prediction markets, insurance products.
So we're starting to see real-world financial applications.
Yes.
That's very cool. Okay, what else has been happening?
Well, they also recently welcomed a new COO, Shyam Nagarajan,
Okay.
and his background is in AI, blockchain, and digital transformation.
Interesting.
So his expertise will be really valuable as they continue to expand their reach and impact.
That's a big deal.
And
Okay, anything else?
So in a push toward even further decentralization, they've introduced the dynamic address book.
Oh.
So think of it like a phone book for the network.
Okay.
But instead of being centrally controlled, it's distributed among the participants of the network.
I'm sensing a theme here. Decentralization.
Yeah.
Seems to be really key.
Yeah, it's a core value.
Okay, and what does that actually mean practically?
Well, this means that the node operators, so the people who are running the computers that power the network,
Mm-hmm.
have more control and autonomy.
Okay.
It's a really important step in creating a network that's truly decentralized.
So no single entity has too much power.
Exactly.
Okay. One more question before we move on. How does Hedera actually determine that HBR's exchange rate?
That's a good question.
I'm just curious.
So they use an open source exchange rate tool that pulls data from several different exchanges
Okay.
to determine the current rate.
Okay. So it's not just like they're making it up.
Yeah.
There's actually like a process and it's transparent.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. So I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've explored what Hedera is, how it works,
Yeah.
some of its key features and use cases,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there's still so much more to uncover.
Definitely.
So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into Hedera's commitment to governance and transparency,
Yeah, it'll be good.
exploring how their unique model is shaping the future of DLT.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's exciting.
I know. I can't wait. Welcome back to our deep dive into Hedera Hashgraph.
It's amazing to see how much is happening in this space.
It is, yeah.
But now I really want to talk more about something that we touched on earlier, Hedera's unique approach to governance.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have innovative technology, but it's another thing to actually have a system in place that makes sure it's used responsibly.
Absolutely. Governance is key, especially with a technology like this that has the potential to be so transformative.
Right.
And I think Hedera really sets itself apart with its governing council,
Yeah.
which has, what, over 30 global organizations?
Yeah. And we're talking about some big names here, like Google, IBM, Boeing, Standard Bank.
Right, a really diverse group.
Yeah. So how does this council actually work in practice? Like, how do they actually make decisions? And how do they make sure that no single entity has too much power?
Right, that's a really important point, that no one organization has too much influence over the network. But the way they do that is decisions are made through this consensus-based voting process.
Okay.
And the council's main responsibility is really to ensure the stability and security of the network and that it's going to be successful in the long term.
Okay, so they're kind of like the guardians of the ecosystem.
Exactly, yeah. They're making sure that the ecosystem stays healthy and thriving.
So how can we be sure that they're actually being transparent about their decisions? Because I think a lot of organizations say, oh yeah, we're transparent, but how does that translate into real action?
Yeah, well, remember how we were talking about how Hedera emphasizes open source code and transparency?
Yeah.
Well, that also extends to the governance. So the minutes from their council meetings, those are recorded and published on the Hedera network itself.
So anyone can go and look and see what decisions were made.
Exactly. So you can see exactly how the decisions were made, who was involved, what factors they considered.
Wow, so they're really putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to transparency.
They are.
Okay, well, that's impressive. It's not just about the meetings, though. How do we know what their overall strategy is and where they're headed in the future?
Right. Well, they also make their roadmap publicly available, which outlines all of their future plans and their development priorities. So it's not like they're operating in some sort of black box. They really want the community to be informed and involved in shaping where the technology is going. And they also really actively engage with regulators and policymakers around the world
Okay.
to make sure that distributed ledger technology is being developed and implemented responsibly.
So they're thinking about the bigger picture as well.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not just about building the tech, it's also about, like, the ethical implications of the tech.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of ethical considerations, we can't forget about Hedera's commitment to sustainability, which we've mentioned a couple of times.
Right.
Hedera Guardian, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Their sustainability platform, which was designed to help businesses track and offset their carbon emissions.
Yeah.
And they actually built the world's largest open source digitized climate methodology library,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which is a pretty big testament to how committed they are to being transparent and to environmental responsibility.
It's really cool to see a technology company really taking such a proactive stance on sustainability.
Yeah.
It shows that they're not just focused on profits, they're also really thinking about building a better future. Now let's talk about the developers.
Go.
What is Hedera doing to support the people who are actually building the applications that are going to power this ecosystem?
Right. Well, I think they've really gone all out to create a supportive and thriving developer community.
Okay.
So their documentation is fantastic. They have a great learning center that covers everything from the basics to more advanced concepts. And then, like we talked about before, they offer grants and bounties to incentivize developers to really contribute to the ecosystem.
So they're really pulling out all the stops to empower developers to build on Hedera.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about those Hedera developer highlights, blog posts? Like, what kind of information can developers find in those?
Those blog posts are great. They offer really concise summaries of recent developments, new features, tutorials, code snippets, and they often highlight different exciting projects that are being built on Hedera. So it can be a good source of inspiration if you're a developer just kind of looking for ideas.
So it's like a one-stop shop for all things Hedera development.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's amazing. But it's not just about providing resources, it's also about fostering a sense of community.
Yeah, definitely.
So what is Hedera doing to create that?
Well, their online community forums are incredibly active, and you have developers from all over the world who are constantly sharing their ideas, helping each other solve problems, collaborating on projects. It's a really vibrant and supportive community, which is so important when you're working with technology that's still relatively new and evolving.
I love to hear that.
Yeah,
It's all about that collaboration, creating that ecosystem where everybody can learn and grow together.
absolutely.
Now, I'm eager to hear more about some of the specific use cases that we're seeing emerge on Hedera. We talked about a few earlier, but I want to dive deeper into some of the ones that really stand out to you.
Okay, yeah.
So one that I find particularly interesting is tokenization. So using Hedera's token service to create and manage digital tokens that represent a wide range of assets.
Right.
So we're talking about everything from loyalty points and in-game currencies to fractional ownership of real estate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be applied to so many different things.
It really has the potential to revolutionize how we think about ownership and investment.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other use cases that you find really fascinating?
Another area where I think Hedera is making big strides is in decentralized finance, or DeFi.
Okay.
With its high throughput, its low fees, its really robust security, it makes it the perfect platform for building like the next generation of financial applications.
So we're talking about things like decentralized exchanges, lending platforms, stablecoins, all built on the Hedera network.
Exactly. Yeah, we're already seeing some really innovative DeFi projects emerging on Hedera, and I think this space is only going to continue to grow exponentially in the next few years.
That is very exciting. It sounds like we're kind of on the cusp of a major shift in the financial world.
I think so, yeah.
And what about NFTs or non-fungible tokens? Because we've seen them explode in popularity recently. But I'm curious to know, what role is Hedera playing in this space?
Hedera's NFT capabilities are really impressive. You know, they offer support for fractional ownership, immutable royalties, even programmable NFTs, which opens up a whole new world of possibilities for artists and creators and collectors.
So it's not just about creating these static digital assets, it's about creating these really dynamic and interactive experiences.
Right, exactly.
That's super fascinating. And of course, we can't forget about Hedera's work in the sustainability space, particularly with Hedera Guardian.
Yeah, Hedera Guardian is really a game changer when it comes to creating auditable and transparent carbon markets. And I think by providing the tools and infrastructure for businesses to be able to accurately track and offset their emissions, Hedera is really empowering them to take real action on climate change.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to see how a technology company can use its platform to actually drive positive change in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've explored Hedera's governance model, their support for developers, and all these diverse use cases that are emerging.
Right.
It's clear that Hedera is not just another blockchain platform.
Yeah.
They're really building something unique and innovative with a real focus on transparency, sustainability, community.
Yeah, for sure.
But as with any emerging technology, there are always challenges and risks to consider.
Of course, yeah.
So in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of those potential hurdles.
Okay.
And we'll discuss the broader implications of Hedera's technology for the world as a whole. Welcome back to our deep dive on Hedera Hashgraph. We've learned so much already.
It's been a really fascinating journey.
But now it's time to kind of zoom out a little bit and think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, the broader context.
We've talked about all the amazing things Hedera can do, but we also have to talk about the challenges.
Yeah, of course.
What are the potential risks? What are the hurdles?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges for any emerging platform is adoption.
Right?
How do you get people to embrace a new way of doing things?
And there are so many players in the blockchain and DLT space.
Oh, yeah. It's a crowded space.
So Hedera really needs to stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not enough to just say, here are the features and benefits.
Right.
They need to show, here's how we're solving real problems that other platforms can't.
Yeah, I think that's where storytelling comes in, right?
Definitely.
Showing how Hedera is actually being used to make a difference.
Real-world examples.
And those stories need to be tailored to different audiences, too. Developers want to hear different things than business leaders or policymakers.
Exactly.
Another challenge that I'm thinking of is regulation.
Oh.
The whole world of blockchain and cryptocurrency is still evolving.
Yeah, it's moving fast.
Governments are kind of playing catch up.
Trying to keep up.
So how does Hedera navigate that?
Yeah, navigating the regulatory landscape is definitely a huge challenge for anybody in this space.
Right.
But Hedera's been pretty proactive in engaging with policymakers.
Okay, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
It's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
But it's probably going to be an ongoing process for a while.
Yeah, for sure. You have to be adaptable
Right.
and willing to adjust as things change.
Yeah. It's like sailing in uncharted waters,
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to be prepared for anything. Okay, so let's talk about the potential impact of Hedera
Okay.
on a global scale.
All right.
This is a technology that could really transform so many aspects of our lives.
It could. It really could.
Imagine a world with transparent and tamper-proof supply chains, secure voting systems, data privacy built in by design.
That's the dream.
These are just a few examples, right?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing when you think about all the possibilities.
Yeah, and with their focus on sustainability,
Right.
it could really help to address climate change
Absolutely.
and promote environmental responsibility.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not just about the technology itself, it's about how we use it
Right.
to create a better world.
A more ethical world.
Yeah. But I think with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Always.
So as this technology continues to evolve, we have to have open and honest conversations about the ethical implications.
How about the potential downsides?
Right. How do we make sure it's used for good? How do we avoid unintended consequences?
Those are the big questions.
Yeah. It's a reminder that technology is a tool, right?
It is, yeah.
It can be used for good or for bad.
It depends who's using it.
It all comes down to our intentions, which is why all this stuff that we've been talking about is so important.
Yes, absolutely.
The transparency, the responsible governance.
That sets a good example.
Yeah, sets the bar high.
Hopefully others will follow.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive on Hedera Hashgraph, I think we're left with a sense of cautious optimism.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
It's a technology with so much potential,
Absolutely.
but it's really up to all of us.
Developers, businesses, policymakers.
Yeah, everyday citizens.
Everybody.
To shape its future and make sure that it's used to build the kind of world that we want to live in.
It's a collective responsibility.
And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's so much more to learn about Hedera Hashgraph.
So we encourage everyone listening to explore the resources that we'll provide in the show notes.
Do your own research.
Keep learning, keep asking questions, and with that, we'll leave you with a final thought. What impact do you think Hedera Hashgraph could have on your life, your work, or the world around you? The future is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.